Well, good afternoon. This is John Davis. Are you able to hear me through your speakers?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, very good. Well, my colleague Mike Brown is going to be doing the CLT presentation, walk you through the slides that are on your screen. And he'll be introducing you to the nuts and bolts of the community land trust. I was asked just to offer a few comments to set the stage, create a context for his talk. And I think the first thing to say is that community land trusts have a long history in Georgia. In fact, Southwest Georgia was the seedbed, the cradle for the first community land trust, New Communities Incorporated, that was founded in 1969. New Communities emerged out of the civil rights struggle in Albany. And the leaders of the Albany movement, who also came from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and the Southwest Georgia Project, saw New Communities as a way to take civil rights one step further into economic rights, economic self-sufficiency, housing security for African American farmers and their families. One of the persons who was active in New Communities was a recent college graduate named Tanganyika, who some of you may know. Tanganyika later moved to Atlanta and helped to lead the effort to revitalize Sweet Auburn, the neighborhood surrounding Martin Luther King Jr.'s childhood home. And Tanganyika brought the community land trust idea to Atlanta, kept trying to keep the ember alive, to fan the flames into life. And as the Atlanta Beltline got planned, she finally had the opportunity to introduce the community land trust to Atlanta. And she posed it as a possible answer to the fears that were being expressed, particularly in the neighborhoods of South Atlanta and West Atlanta, fears about displacement that might happen because of the buildup of the Beltline. And in Tanganyika, along with Valerie Wilson at the Beltline Partnership, and Andy Snegenberger, who at that point directed the Association of Community Development Organizations there in Atlanta. The three of them, in Tanganyika, Valerie, and Andy, led the effort in 2009 to create something called the Atlanta Land Trust Collaborative. And part of the Atlanta Land Trust Collaborative's original mission was to help create a policy environment, a political environment that would be favorable to the development of community land trusts throughout the neighborhoods affected by the Beltline. And what that meant in Atlanta to them, as trying to create a favorable policy environment, was to try to convince city officials, policymakers in Atlanta, that long-term affordability should be a priority. Trying to convince policymakers of the value of stewardship, which Mike Brown will be talking more about in a moment. Now, as you probably know, or suspect, we still have a long ways to go. Not all policymakers in Atlanta are yet on board with this idea of creating a stock of owner-occupied housing that is permanently affordable. And not all policymakers are yet comfortable with the idea that neighborhood residents should have a loud voice, a strong hand in determining how their own neighborhoods should be developed. These are ideas, however, of the community land trust. They are probably dear to your hearts as well. Otherwise, you would not be there today to have this conversation about community land trust. So I'm now going to tell you a lot more about how the community land trust works, how the land trust puts these ideas into practice of community-led development of permanently affordable housing. With that as sort of the stage, set the stage and the context, Mike, you want to walk us through your slides?
Sure. Thanks, John. I want to, before we get started, can you all see the words on the screen? Can you see the words community land trust?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure the technology is working. I'm delighted to be having this conversation with you all. John and I have the great fortune of working with organizations and neighborhood groups like yours around the country who have embraced this unique strategy as a way to help their neighborhoods and communities control their destiny over the long haul. So what I'm going to do for the next 20 minutes or so is I'm going to walk you through a series of slides that are intended to sort of explain what community land trusts are and how they operate, and some of the benefits that we've seen over the last 35, 40 years. Then we will open it up for your questions and comments. Okay. So there are some 300 community land trusts operating in communities and neighborhoods across the country, and they've elected this, they've chosen this as a strategy, as their preferred strategy for addressing some of the challenges they face in those neighborhoods and communities. And so, if we're going to take a look at the community land trust, as a potential solution, we should at least acknowledge the challenges that we face, right? Which is that in some neighborhoods, in a growing number of neighborhoods and communities, housing is already beyond the reach of what lots of people can afford. And in many of these neighborhoods and communities, those costs, the costs can keep getting higher. The gaps between what people can realistically pay home ownership based on their income, the gaps between that, what they get qualified for, what the cost of housing is, those get bigger, and more people are in need, right? So there's a challenge in creating long-term affordability in those neighborhoods. And in others, where in neighborhoods where the market is not hot, or at least not hot yet, there's always a challenge of how do we protect and preserve the quality and condition of housing when there may be no particular market incentive to do so, where absentee landlords have the ability to control neighborhoods and things like that, situations like that. And whether it's a hot market or it's a relatively weak market, how do we prevent households with limited means from being displaced, right? So an expensive market it's hard to get in and it's hard to stay. And one of the challenges in a weaker market that are in need of neighborhood revitalization is that we don't put the long-term protections in place that are needed. So inevitably, one of the, almost without question, one of the outcomes of successful neighborhood revitalization is eventually the people with the lower end of the economic spectrum are priced out or pushed out of the neighborhood. So in the face of that, in most of the housing programs, the affordable housing programs that are out there, and there are never enough resources, and there are never enough organizations and municipalities partnering with them to address all the needs that, by and large, we take a look at the programs and say, okay, we're going to try and figure out a way to bridge these gaps. Most often, the assistance is targeted to an individual household, to a potential home buyer. We're talking about homeowner-occupied housing here. By bridging the gap between what the cost of the housing would otherwise be, or in some neighborhoods, the cost of producing the house is more than the bank will lend for, so it creates either this affordability gap or value gap both. But the point here is that if there's an organization, typically if there's an organization that's trying to address this affordable housing gap, oftentimes the subsidy is provided in terms of an outright gift of money to an individual household to help them purchase a home, which is great for them. Or it's structured as a loan that's forgiven slowly over time or due on sale. But the point is, in either of those cases, the money is not invested to make the home affordable, but the resources are targeted to do is to help that particular household at this point in time be able to afford that home. And typically, not always, but typically there are no long-term protections that are put in place that say, well, we've gone to the hard work and a substantial investment of resources, organizationally, financially, to create housing affordability, but there typically are no restrictions that say, well, let's make sure we protect and leverage that investment over time by keeping that home affordable. And there are variances on all of these, of course, but the other sort of reality out there is that these programs are typically not accompanied by services and resources that are designed to help people be successful. I mean, some people are able to make the transition into home ownership and they do just fine, but others can use some help along the way. And most of the time, the programs that are out there, the existing affordable housing programs, don't have long-term affordability restrictions and no particular commitment to provide or make available support and assistance to help first-time home buyers become and remain successful over time. So in that context, then, Community Land Trust do a number of things particularly well. As John indicated, it's a strategy that many communities have chosen because it's a way to keep housing that's initially made affordable over the long haul, benefiting multiple households with the same investment of resources. And in so doing, the investment of those resources are protected and they're actually magnified. The benefit of those is magnified because they don't only provide affordability to the initial lucky household that has access to these resources, but to subsequent households as well, and we'll talk about how that works. They create an environment. This is often not our particular community development goal, but another important piece of this is that what we've seen, and I'll explain this a bit more, is the mortgage loans that people get to buy CLT homes at an affordable price. These homeowners end up remaining successful over time, including finding themselves in situations where they get into trouble with their mortgage and get into default and foreclosure. So these end up becoming pretty safe loans for the mortgage banking community, which is another benefit. And perhaps most important of all is that this really is a long-term commitment by the community to assist community residents in their efforts to become and remain successful over time. So, and you know, just do this by doing things very differently than we typically think of when we think of homeownership and when we think of affordable housing programs and affordable homeownership programs. Because Community Land Trust, as I will explain, actually structure homeownership and what is actually owned in a different way than is typically seen in the conventional market. How the assistance that's used to make affordable, to create the affordability in the first place, how it's applied and how it's utilized. And then, as I mentioned, as you'll hear me say throughout my remarks, Community Land Trust take this really long-term approach in structuring ongoing relationships with the people who are the beneficiaries of the CLT's activities. So, let's start with the organization itself. Typically, like WALT, Community Land Trusts are community-based nonprofit corporations that have a mission that qualifies them as charitable, as specified in Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. It says, well, there are certain organizations that should be recognized for their charitable purpose because of their activities. They can be tax exempt. There's a series of benefits for that. Most community land trusts structure their mission and their operations in a way that qualifies for 501c3 designation. One of the hallmarks of community land trust is, and John mentioned this in his introductory remarks, one of the hallmarks of community land trust is they take the very different perspectives that are at play within the service area, whether that's a neighborhood or a series of neighborhoods or an entire city, however the geographic service area of the CLT is determined by the local community. The board of directors is representative of that community. Typically, community land trusts draw their membership and their governance from the communities in which they operate, and structure the board of directors in three equal parts. So, pretty commonly, but almost without exception, the board of directors of this community-based organization is comprised of three equal parts. A third of the seats are reserved and set aside for the people who end up living in the affordably priced homes that the CLT makes and keeps available. So the direct beneficiaries of this program have an equal voice in the governance and the strategic direction and the management of the ongoing operations of this community organization. Another third of the seats are reserved for people who live within the same community district, the same neighborhood, the same geographic service area that's designated by the CLT. And while they're not direct beneficiaries, they're not living, the ones who are living in CLT homes, they're the neighbors of the CLT homes, so we want to make sure that their perspective is represented equally on the board of directors. And the remaining third are those who represent more broadly the interests of the general public. And there's a variety of ways in which this remaining third is structured, but typically one of the common practices that this remaining third of the seats are people who bring particular skills and expertise that can help enhance the likelihood that this organization is going to remain successful over time. And the point here is that these are very different perspectives, all looking for the same goal. We seek those very different perspectives in equal balance on the board to create the opportunity for dialogue and collaboration that doesn't typically exist out there in government, in for-profit organizations, or for that matter, even many non-profit organizations. So the second distinction of community land trust is they structure the ownership, as I mentioned earlier, they structure the ownership of property very differently. What we typically associate with home ownership is that a lucky household that has enough income and creditworthiness to be able to afford to purchase a home, they buy everything. They buy the house and the land that sits on. The community land trust draws the distinction and says that the home should be owned by the homeowner, but the land should be owned by the community itself in order to protect the long-term interests of the broader community. So, at the very core of community land trust, they get the distinction between who gets to own the home that's located on the land and the land that home sits on. So the home buyer in a CLT transaction purchases this home at an affordable price with resources that the CLT has cobbled together to create this initial affordability. So the home buyer buys and owns her own home. But the community organization, on behalf of the community it serves, retains the ownership of the land, but leases its use to that home buyer by means of a 99-year inheritable renewable ground lease. So this ground lease provides that homeowner an exclusive, legally binding right to use that property for 99 years plus 99 years, and they keep passing along to their heirs. And the rights of for the next slide, this ground lease then serves a twofold function. One is that the legal instrument that's executed at closing is recorded in the county land records, or a memorandum of the lease is recorded in the county land records, so it's durable, it's enforceable, it provides an exclusive, legally binding right by the owner of the home, the buyer and owner of the home that's located on this, for 99 years. And again, they can pass along to their heirs, they can pass along to their heirs, still in that chain of family lineage. At the end of the first 99-year term, it can be renewed for an additional 98 years. So it's a document that's as legally binding as a deed or a mortgage or any of these other documents and instruments that we use regarding property ownership. The other purpose of this ground lease is it lays out the expectations that the CLT has for its homeowners in exchange for receiving the assistance that the CLT has provided to help them purchase and own a home they would otherwise not be able to afford. And it defines what the homeowner can expect of this community organization that set itself up to make this thing happen. So we don't have time today. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about it, but the kinds of decisions that are in terms and conditions that are stipulated in the community land trust ground lease are made by the local community, by this organization that has the 3-part 4. And they're always common, sensible, normal practices that promote the best parts of our neighborhood. So, for example, many community land trusts will say in their ground lease, a as a condition of purchasing the home and leasing the land from the CLT, the homeowner agrees to reside in that home as their primary residence. They can't use it as an income property. They can't sublet it out at certain times of the year to be able to make some money, because we want to stabilize the neighborhood. That's good for the neighborhood. So we expect people who purchase a home, one of these homes, to receive the assistance to be able to do it, that they in fact live in their homes, and that they don't sublet their property. So that the ground lease to stipulate that you got to follow the rules, right? So that means you got to abide by the terms and conditions of this common, sensible lease. Any other local ordinances and codes. You need to take care of your home. You're responsible for your own behavior of the people who are there. So it's really just a way to sort of reinforce what's appropriate for the neighborhoods in which these homes are located. And because protecting affordability is such a high priority, the ground lease, and every community land trust gets to determine the terms and conditions of their ground lease based upon local needs and preferences. But in areas where housing is already expensive and likely to get more expensive, or where housing may not be expensive yet, but perhaps could get to the point where it would become inexpensive in the future, or become much more expensive in the future, the CLT will stipulate that this home is not only made initially affordable, but it's designed to be kept affordable over the long haul. So rather than providing affordability assistance in the form of a grant, an outright gift of money to an individual home buyer to purchase a market rate home, or structuring that subsidy as that financial assistance as a loan that's forgivable over time or has to be paid back, the CLT uses whatever resources it can assemble and writes down the purchase price to a level that's affordable to a household that would otherwise not be able to afford. And who it serves and how much affordability really varies from community to community based on opportunities and needs. But one of the requirements that's stipulated in the lease is an agreement that says that I get to live here the rest of my life. I can live here, I can pass along to my kids, we can stay in my family lineage can stay in this for 198 years, if they so choose. But in the event that I ever choose to leave, and I wish to sell my house for whatever reason, what's being asked of me is the affordability that was provided to me as an individual homeowner. The CLT has asked me to leave the affordability that was created for me when I move on, to leave that affordability, so that same opportunity that was available for me when I bought my home and moved in is available for the next household that's in the same circumstances that I was when I moved in. Right, so the CLT and the homeowner come to terms, come to agreement on the terms of a resale formula that's used to determine the price at which the homeowner can sell their home. And again, there's a great deal of variety in the way these resale permits are structured. All of them presume that when the homeowner sells, they should get back the equity that they built up by making a cash down payment, by making monthly payments and paying down the principal balance of their home, as would be the case with any other homeowner. And that they should also, in addition to that, get some percentage, some portion, some share of any increase in value of the property. But it's a share of the appreciation in the appreciation of the value of the property, because if you allow the CLT homeowner to sell the home for whatever the market will bear, the affordability that was invested in the home disappears in their pocket, and the home is sold at a market rate, and we have to start the process all over again. Here is just a simple example. Let's not worry about whether these are the right numbers for you all, but I want to illustrate how one type of resale form works, which is an appraisal-based one that says, way to make the home affordable. Should you choose to sell, you can sell your house for the affordable price that you paid for it, plus an amount that's determined by a formula. In this case, the formula is, we'll take a look at the change in the value of the property from the day that the home buyer purchases the home to the day that the homeowner decides to sell the home. We'll take a look at what's happened to the value. If there's been an increase, the homeowner gets to keep a designated, pre-agreed upon percentage of that increase in the value. So here, just to illustrate, let's not worry about the arithmetic or the numbers here. So illustrate how this works. So let's say this is a home, land, and the buildings itself. The total cost would otherwise sell for $140. Again, that may not be the right number for your neighborhood. Let's bear with me so I can illustrate the point. But the CLT market this home to also can't afford $140,000. They can afford $100,000. So somehow the CLT assembles the resources that it needs so that it can write the purchase price from an unaffordable price of $140,000 down to an affordable price of $100,000. So in effect, providing this homebuyer household with $40,000 worth of write-down assistance to help them purchase a home they would otherwise not be able to afford. And just for this example, it's consistent with what many CLTs do. It may not be what you all decide to do. It may not. It really can vary from community to community. 25% of the increase in the value is what, in this example, the homeowner is allowed to take. So let's play out a scenario in the future. Everything goes fine, but it's like 5 years or 10 years down the line, the homeowner decides to sell. CLT will order an appraisal at that point, and that appraisal will determine that the value, in my example here, has increased from $140,000 to $180,000. So the property has increased by $40,000. The homeowner gets 25% of that. So $10,000 is the amount of the appreciation that the homeowner can take, and everything else remains in the home. So what it means is that the sale proceeds to the homeowner and the purchase price to the next incoming home buyer is $110,000, which is the original affordable purchase price of $100,000 up in the top, the original purchase, plus the $10,000 in additional equity that the homeowner is allowed to receive, because that's 25% of the change in the value of the property during the time that they live there. So what this allows is the homeowner to build, the homeowner at time of sale to build some equity, and at the same time it allows the CLT to keep this home affordable and make it available for sale without requiring any additional subsidy resources from the city or through fundraising or for any other sort of ways that organizations, the other strategies that organizations pursue to raise the subsidies that they need. So in this example, the homeowner is allowed to take equity that they otherwise would not be able to have, and the CLT is able to sell this home that has a market value of $180,000, can sell it for $110,000 without requiring any additional subsidy. And the way this all works, as John pointed out, is because the CLT is not focused on simply creating the affordable home, but about making sure that it can do whatever it can to support and assist the people that move into the CLT's homes during the time that they're living there, to support and assist their efforts to become and remain successful. Part of that is the CLT lays out very specific expectations. You need to take care of your home. You need to make sure that your guests are, you're responsible for the behavior of your guests. You want to make sure that capital improvements that are being made here to the home, to the CLT homes, are being done in a manner that's appropriate, consistent with what's required in the local community. And the community land trust, because it lays out these expectations in the ground lease, the CLT also takes on the responsibility for monitoring and enforcing them. And the overwhelming experience of community land trusts around the country is that people who move into CLT homes, they understand the clear expectations, and they're grateful for the opportunity, and so they do a really fabulous job of following rules without the CLT even having to do that much beyond just making sure that the rules are followed. It becomes, because of the nature, because of the way this ownership is structured, CLT owning the land, controlling the resale should the homeowner ever sell, the relationship moves very quickly from the CLT being perceived as, well, we're just going to make sure you follow the rules, into a long-term stewardship, relationship-based arrangement. So the CLT, many CLTs who take their work seriously are providing services or arranging for services. They're not interested in running people's lives, but they're making the resources and opportunities available so that any particular CLT homeowner that might need some assistance or is looking for some additional direction or support, they have those services. They have access to that ongoing support and assistance in an effort to help them become and remain successful over time. We frequently refer to this as backstopping. The CLT stands behind the homeowners, just doing whatever it can, in the event that people need some additional assistance, that do what they can to help this all work out well over the long haul. I put this slide in here. My choices in clip art apparently are not very good here, but I wanted to point out that the most common use of community land trusts around the country, and certainly what's being considered and what's being carried out in Atlanta, is home ownership. This same arrangement where the CLT owns the land and somebody else owns the building could work for rental housing or housing cooperative, but equity condominiums. There are CLTs that are putting commercial properties on it. The point here is that by owning the land, community land trust organization, on behalf of the community that it serves and that it represents, is able to protect important community assets, particularly those that have benefited from the investment of public sector and private sector resources to be made available and affordable in the first place. So before let me take a look at some of the tangible incomes that we've seen. We've done a pretty good job of building strong organizations, and we're getting much better at tracking data that we know anecdotally, but we're tracking it nationwide at this point. And what we've seen is that over 90% of CLT homeowners remain in their homes for the first 5 years. That's important for neighborhoods that are interested in stabilizing the neighborhood. It's important for lenders and funders because it shows that there's a certain level of ongoing stability that's there for the homeowners and the communities in which they live. Interestingly enough, these are CLT home buyers are buying their homes with a 30-year mortgage from the bank at an affordable price. They're entering into a 99-year ground lease, and on average, CLT homeowners are in their homes for 7 years, which is what Fannie Mae tells us is pretty consistent in the marketplace. Now, this particular statistic varies considerably based upon community preferences and opportunities, right? So some CLTs, part of their goal is to reward, encourage people, to incentivize them for staying longer. So there are examples where there's CLTs that are operating where people are staying in their homes much longer because that's what the CLT, that's what they want to do, and that's what the CLT is promoting and encouraging. And we have done some studies. John was involved with some detailed studies up in Burlington, Vermont, where he lives, that Burlington Community Land Trust, now called the Champlain Housing Trust. They have been around long enough, they've sold enough homes, and they've gone through enough resales to be able to do some studying about, so does the CLT deliver on its promises? Is it really protecting affordability? Is it preserving and leveraging the public and private resources that go in to create the affordability? A range of those issues have been studied. Most interesting to me in all of this is what happens. Where do CLT homeowners, what happens to them when they move? Where do they go? And while it's true that some decide to go back to renting, others stay, they might know what's going on. What we have seen when we've done those sorts of studies, including is that somewhere around 70% of CLT homeowners leverage the security and the stability that they have as being homeowners that they would otherwise not be able to have. And they take this bit of equity that they've been able to build, and they go out and buy a house on their own without any particular assistance. And it just so happens that the CLT has kept the home affordable, so that process could start all over again with another limited income household. And they stay there the rest of their lives, and they may use this as a stepping stone to moving out in the conventional market. We've also seen, I mentioned this earlier, this is at the height of the Great Recession back in 2008, 2009, 2010. We were in pretty dire straits economically in this country. The yellow bars are showing what the Mortgage Bankers Association documents are the number of delinquencies back then. These red numbers are the numbers for CLTs during that same period of time. So as you can see, with the support and assistance of Community Land Trust, working with their homeowners over time, not only are what we're seeing is some dramatic reductions in foreclosures, which translates into an increasing number of households being successful over time. So you can see in 2010, for example, nationwide, 4.63% of all mortgages in the country were in foreclosure during that same period of time. The foreclosure rate among CLT homeowners was literally 1/10 of that. So that demonstrates that Community Land Trusts are doing good work in helping people become or remain successful. So, in closing, homes that are made affordable and available are kept affordable and available cases, John pointed out that there is not a public policy preference for community land trusts and subsidy retention and long-term protection of affordability. But the argument that community land trusts make is this is a better use of funds than giving it away because we can make sure that the affordability is there for multiple households over over a longer period of time. The initial investment of resources can benefit not only one household but multiple households over an extended period of time. Additionally, mortgage financing is safe, which means that homeowners are much less likely to find themselves in incidents of foreclosure. And as we all know, communities benefit when there's supply, when there's diversity of all sorts, including economic diversity in our neighborhoods. And communities can benefit when they're quality, permanently affordable homes that maintain their condition and value, even as the homes, as the transfer prices remain affordable. And finally, it's a strategy that, while the primary focus is often single-family home ownership, can also be used for a variety of other residential and non-residential uses. So at this point, what I think I'd like to do, this is our website. If you're interested in taking a look at, for more information, we created an online community land trust resource center. So if you go to burlingtonassociates.com, you can find out more information about us. But if you go to the CLT resource center, there's a ton of additional information is designed to provide additional information and clarification going forward. So at this point, we agreed. Pamela, John, and I, when we set this up, we'd open up the floor to questions. So I turn it over to you, Pamela, at this point.
First question, does the CLT have to approve a new home buyer or renter? Example, background check.
Typically, these are the really great part about community land trust is there's no single right way to do it. We have seen best practices because there have been lots of CLTs doing this over the years. But every community gets to make those sorts of decisions themselves. Typically, the community land trust does have some sort of threshold eligibility and selection criteria that they use. Just how intensive and just how restrictive those background checks are depends upon local preferences. So it varies. There's some CLTs that say you need to, in order to purchase and own one of our homes, you need to have an income below 100% of AMI or 60% of AMI, very median, however that's determined. You need to have enough income and creditworthiness to be able to qualify for the mortgage. You need to be old enough to be an adult in the state in which the CLT is operating, which allows you to be able to enter into legal contracts. So some just say as long as you meet these requirements, you're income qualified, and you can afford this home based upon your income and credit, you get the money. Other CLTs utilize community preference criteria to guide their selection of home buyers. And some CLTs will go so far as to say we do criminal background checks, similar to what the banks would do. So it really is a decision that can be made locally based upon local preferences. I probably should also say that sometimes the funding sources stipulate some of this. So occasionally the decision of the local group is impacted by a funder that provides the funding, but that varies from case to case.
Okay, question number 2.
The only thing that I would add is that, as Mike has pointed out, if you're selling homes, the family that has been chosen by the community land trust is going to have to be eligible for a mortgage, because they have to be able to go to a bank with the CLT possibly by their side, and they're going to have to qualify for a private mortgage in order to buy a house. So that's another set of hoops that it would be buyer has to jump through. But I believe the question here was, can the land trust set their own criteria for who gets in, who doesn't get in, and the answer is yes.
Okay. Question number 2. Who pays the property taxes?
You want to take that one, Chuck?
Well, I mean, it's, in the ideal situation, the land trust is paying the taxes on the land, and the homeowner is paying the taxes on the house. However, every month, the land trust is going to collect from the homeowner a fee, to occupy the land that's owned by the community, by the land trust. And part of that fee that the land trust is going to collect from the homeowner, the land trust is going to turn around and pay the city or the county for the property taxes on the land. So, in effect, the homeowner is paying the taxes on both the land and the house.
Question number 3. Are there resources available to assist the initiators of new CLTs to get set up and started?
Oh, I wish that was the case. The challenge that faces nonprofits and community organizations, charitable entities, is the same, regardless of the focus of the organization, which is how do we get our organization going, and how do we keep our organization, how do we sustain its operations over time? And that's an ongoing challenge, as I'm sure Pamela and the folks at Walt can attest, right? So what I will tell you is that oftentimes community land trusts that are started by neighborhood groups, by local organizers, by nonprofit organizations will often fund their initial setup, and sometimes their ongoing operations, but more likely their initial costs, through the sources that we're accustomed, that we would expect, through foundation grants, through contributions from the private sector, or in some cases from the public sector. I'm working with a couple of communities right now where the city is actually sponsoring the community land trust, and they're covering the costs for the decision-making process, and intend to provide staffing for the CLT for a while. So, it varies from community to community, but the reality is that most CLTs, when they start up and when they, as they go forward, have to really scrap the resources that are out there. It's unfortunate, but that's just the reality.
Oh, okay, question number 4. Does CLT offer any solutions for individuals without the savings or credit to buy a home and need to rent or get an apartment?
I'll start, and John, you can certainly add to it. But yes, my explanation to the land trust was pretty heavily focused on owner-occupied housing. There are many CLTs that have rental housing as part of their portfolio, both because that's an urgent need and because they're interested in serving households that don't want to purchase and own a home of their own, or they don't have enough sufficient income or creditworthiness to be able to qualify for a mortgage from a bank. So there are CLTs that where the building that's located on CLT-owned land is not sold to an individual home buyer, but is rented by an individual household, or it's multiple units in an apartment building that's located on the CLT land. So yes, rental is a part of the CLT portfolios, and the purpose of that by the CLT owning the land and leasing it to the owners and operators of rental housing is to ensure that rental housing that's made initially affordable is kept affordable over the long haul. Do you want to speak to that, John?
Yeah, just a couple of added comments. One is that there are some community land trusts that do lease to purchase programs where they actually rent the house out for a period of up to 2 years while people get their feet on the ground, get their finances in shape, build a relationship with the land trust. And after 2 years of renting the house from the CLT, the family then buys the house. So that's another variation. And there are a lot of community land trusts sort of start out doing one thing and end up doing a lot of others. I'll give you an example of the community land trust here in Burlington, Vermont, where I live. Our CLT was started in 1984. And for the first couple of years, the only kind of housing, the only projects we did were single-family detached houses that already existed. We would buy the house, rehab it, separate the title between the land and the building, and then sell the house to an income-eligible family. And then after a few years, we acquired a couple of duplexes on land trust land. And then we got involved with multi-unit condominiums. And then we did a few limited equity housing cooperatives. And then we got involved with rental housing. And today we've done a few, recently we've done a couple of homeless shelters, and we bought a couple of old hotels that are basically single room occupancy housing that help homeless people get on their feet until they can move into rental housing. So we never thought we were going to do anything except single-family detached houses. But then over time, because we were trying to serve people further and further down the income ladder, we started to do different kinds of housing. So our mission pushed us toward diversifying the holdings in our community land trust.
Okay, question number 5. How readily available is financing for CLT home buyers? Are most CLT home buyers purchasing from conventional banks?
Really good question. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that was a really difficult question to answer because it was pretty hard. The good news is there are CLTs around the country that have worked with their local lenders and their local mortgage lenders are originating loans to qualified CLT home buyers. I mean, this is it can be done. Now, what we need to acknowledge is that this is a bit non-traditional. I suspect this is a bit of what's behind the question. Is what banks are accustomed to is, yes, they will only lend to a qualified buyer based on income and credit. And the sort of universally accepted affordability standard is your housing costs, for home ownership, principal and interest on your mortgage, your taxes and insurance, and the other monthly fees you might pay cannot exceed more than 30% or so of your gross household income. But what banks typically do as security, the collateral for their loan, the protection that they have is that I will lend you, going back to my earlier example, my hypothetical example, we'll lend you the $100,000. You have the income and the creditworthiness to do this, but what we're going to take as collateral is our protection to make sure that you pay it back. So we have the ability, if you don't pay it back, to take your land and house. Well, CLTs don't offer that same arrangement because the CLT owns the land, and I lease the land as the home buyer and own my own home. So part of the process that we have to go through is there's a learning curve that local lenders, that local banks have to sort of work through. For example, I've done a little bit of work with Pierre Gaither and the Pittsburgh Community Improvement Association in the Pittsburgh neighborhood. They have a CDC there that also is operating a CLT program. And they've sold their first CLT house. They've been having some difficulty with lenders, so I spent an hour and a half or so on the phone with a bunch of lenders a week or two ago, just explaining how this thing would work, explaining the particular requirements, assuring them that there's lots of banks out there that are doing it, that Fannie Mae has blessed the CLT strategy. Fannie Mae will buy loans from local banks that originated. So we can get them there. It just typically involves some learning curve. And there's often some technical issues there, but it's not easy, but we can get them there.
Okay, question number 6 is, how long does it take to even form an effective CLT?
And I didn't hear to form an effective CLT, is that the word?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Right.
Well, that really varies. That's the kind of work that we do. So John and I have both worked with organizations that said, well, we'd like to explore this, work with them to help them assess the feasibility. Maybe a really good idea, but either the resources that are available, is there likely demand for resale and controlled lease, homes for sale on ground leases. There's a series of feasibility issues that have to be thought through, outlining the fundamental business assumptions about what kind of housing goes on this, where does the subsidy come from, what's the nature of the organization, how many homes might the CLT be able to build, what are the ongoing functions the CLT needs to manage. So the feasibility assessment process typically takes place before you move into implementation, just because you want to make a really informed decision about whether or not this thing, which sounds like a really great idea because it is actually going to be around 10, 15, maybe 10 years from now. But there's a plan for that. And then the second phase is often designing it. So what are the terms and conditions of your ground lease? What's a fair and equitable resale formula? How do you get lenders on board? What are the criteria they're going to use in the process we're going to follow to determine who gets to live in the homes? How do we make sure that we're doing a really excellent job of explaining to people the benefits as well as the responsibilities of buying, going, and selling a home through the CLT? So there's a process there. I've seen it as short as 6 to 8 months. I've also seen the process drag on for as much as a couple of years. So that really is a function of a number of factors, including just how quickly can the community coalesce and come to consensus on some of these decisions, what kind of resources can be made available, those sorts of things. So I'm sorry to give a wishy-washy answer, but I think it's a process of 6 to 18 months on average. That's my experience.
And because the reason I wanted to get clear on what that adjective was, and it was effective. You can certainly create an organization very quickly. There's nothing very magical or difficult about just going down and incorporating a new nonprofit and saying we're a community land trust. And I think what Mike was talking about was a process, a very deliberate process of looking through what are the policies and procedures for this new organization. And, and that can take a little bit of time. Also, once you get to the point where you're actually acquiring land and doing development, it's very difficult to do that with volunteers. And that's where the effective organization is important. I mean, you really do need a staff person, and you've got to figure out a way to pay that staff person at the point that you are holding land, doing development, selling houses, building relationship, a long-term relationship with the people in those homes. So, so it's always partially up to the community to create an effective organization, but it's also a matter of money and hiring the right person to run the organization.
And if I may add to that, obviously the larger the CLT's portfolio of homes and households and properties, the more staffing capacity it needs, right? So a CLT that has responsibility for 5 homeowners has a very ongoing responsibilities. But that's a different level of capacity that's needed than if it had 50 or 100. So that's that's why we typically suggest, sort of our recommendation is that we start the process, say, we're in complete agreement that this is a really brilliant idea. Let's just make sure we're clear about it, because I'm being partly facetious, but I'm also partly serious here when I say, if you're going to sign if you all, my point here, if you all are the CLT, and you're going to sign a 99-year lease with me as a home buyer, and explain to me that I can pass it along to my heirs and I can pass it on to their heirs. At the end of the first 99-year term, it can be renewed for another 99 years. I have to have some confidence that your organization is going to be around 99 years from now to renew that lease. Right? I mean, there are no guarantees, but and I'm being a little bit facetious because there are guarantees, but these are long-standing, impactful promises and commitments, and so they're not to be taken lightly. And I know that Pamela and the folks involved can certainly attest to that, as can every other CLT that's in operation. This is a lot of work. The payoff is terrific, but it's certainly not a situation where you say, well, let's give this a try and see what happens. If it doesn't work out, at least we try. That's, you're selling homes, you're leasing land, you're making long-term commitments to the neighborhoods in which you operate, to the people living in housing, to the neighbors, people in the CLT, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to go on and on about it. This is a big bit of work.
Okay, this is going to be the last question. Actually, the last question was broken up into 4 individual questions, but I'm only going to ask. I'm only going to read you the 2 that I feel like haven't necessarily been answered. The other 2 have been touched upon.
Okay.
Number 1 is, does the homeowner have to pay PMI? And the second one is, does the local tax assessor view home value and appreciation?
All right, tell you what, why don't I take the first part of that question and I'll turn it over to you, John.
Okay.
Bye. All right? So, PMI. Banks, in a typical situation, forget about CLTs, as we all know, they get, their security is they get the whole property. And as an additional protection, so in the event of foreclosure, they get the land and the home. The CLT, that's a bit different because we've never pledged the land as collateral. But in addition to having pretty substantial security for their loan, the banks they always make a decision, almost without exception, that in the event that that the home buyer, this is not a CLT transaction, just to illustrate the point, if a typical home buyer cannot come up with 20% of the value as a down payment. So $100,000, if I can't, that's the amount of money that I need to borrow from my home. If I can't come up with that value of the home, if I can't come up with $20,000 cash, I don't get the loan. They want their loan, the size of the loan, to be no more than 80% of the value. And if I can't, and the bank is willing to do it, they're certainly going to require what's called private mortgage insurance, which is basically an insurance policy that's an additional protection. Most CLTs, again, go back to my example. Yeah, we're not providing a gift of money, but we're also not structuring the subsidy as a grant. We're writing down the purchase price of the house. So by the CLT structuring the subsidy that way, by selling the home for, again, in my hypothetical example, for $100,000, even though it has a market value of $140,000, what the CLT is doing is, in effect, putting down they're making an equity investment on behalf of the buyer. They're, in effect, making a large down payment. The size of the down payment depends upon the income of the household and the availability of subsidies, resources to be able to bridge that gap, but most CLTs try to make sure that the difference between what the home would otherwise sell for and the price that the CLT is actually able to sell for is at 80%. But the difference between what it would sell for and what the CLT can sell it for is that there's a 20% differential. For a variety of reasons, not the least of which is PMI. So if the CLT is selling a home at for $140,000, $40,000 and comes up with $14,000, 10% purchase price write down. That's not 20%. So in that case, the CLT home buyer would be obliged by the lender to carry private mortgage insurance. But if the CLT came up with $28,000, which is 20% of $140,000, so it went purchase price from $140 down to, what is that, $112. Because the CLT is contributing 20% of the value as an equity contribution to private mortgage insurance would not be required. I think I probably could have explained that a little more simply, but hopefully you get the point that I'm making. Talk about taxes, John?
Yeah, if you said that's complicated. I get to talk about taxes. Well, the first thing to say about property taxes is that I do not have any idea how your tax assessor in Atlanta or in Fulton County will treat this particular deal. So that's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is that across the United States, it's a real patchwork quilt of how local assessors are, valuing and taxing this kind of housing. Well, what I can say is that here's the way it ought to be taxed. The land is held by a nonprofit corporation that has encumbered, tied up that land for 99 years and is collecting a lease fee every month and leasing that land out. And 99 times out of 100, the lease fee that the land trust is charging to the homeowner is far less than what the market value, the market rate lease fee would be. So let's say the market rate appraisal would say that that land is worth so much that you could be charging $100 a month at a market rent. But instead, the land trust is charging only $10 a month to use the land. The way the the tax assessor ought to collect taxes should be based on that stream of income to the land trust of $10 a month as opposed to a stream of income of $100 a month. So the first thing is that the taxes on the land should be based on the income approach on what income the land trust is actually deriving from the land. It should be lower than the highest and best use. On the house, there's a permanent ceiling. There's a cap on the resale price of that house. The way the taxes ought to be assessed and ought to be collected should reflect that permanent cap on the resale price of the house. So a homeowner should not be forced to pay taxes on value that the homeowner can never realize, can never put in his or her pocket. So that's a very long-winded, complicated, this is the way it ought to be. I do not know how your assessor will actually value and tax houses in your neighborhood.
John, I just thank you for that, and I want to put it to you. I'm looking at, I put slide 11 back up, the resale fund example. So for those of you that are looking at the slide on screen, John's second point about that property should be taxed at the actual value that's available. If you take a look at the example here, let's say this particular homeowner decides not to sell, but they know that their home that the appraisal shows the value is $180,000 in my hypothetical example. But were they to sell it, all that they would be able to sell this for it on this day right here that we're looking at is $110,000. So arguably, the taxes should be based not on $180,000 worth of value, because the actual value that's available to the homeowner is the $110,000. That's the maximum they would be able to sell their for, that they would be able to realize. So many CLTs try to build the case that the taxation of the land, as John explained, should be based upon the revenue stream that the CLT collects through this nominal monthly lease fee from each homeowner, from the homeowner in the example. And that in this example, the taxes on the home would be based not on $180,000, its market value, but would be based upon the $110,000.
So land trusts do not remove land from the tax rolls, do not remove houses from the tax rolls. But what they do is they go to the assessor and they say, we want a fair valuation, we want a fair assessment based on the economic realities of this deal.
Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Well, you're welcome. I hope this was helpful for you all. It's certainly fun for us to be talking about it. I wish I could see your faces and some engage was there, but I hope that this has been a worthwhile way to spend an hour and a half of your afternoon. We gave you our website, so if you're looking for the name of our website, so if you're looking for additional information, that's where you can find it.
And the reason that I started out by talking about creating this favorable policy environment is that in our experience, the only way that happens is because grassroots groups, those of their city government, advocate for some of these values of long-term affordability, community-led development, community voice in development. So this does not happen by itself. It only happens because organizations like WALT are advocating for a policy shift that will be favorable to this particular approach to affordable housing.
So, Mr. Davis and Mr. Browns, we sincerely thank you for your time this afternoon.
Our pleasure. We wish you all the best in your further thoughts and deliberations, and hope that the rest of your weekend is lovely.
Thank you so very much, gentlemen.